I believe the Lord has laid on my heart a psalm, which is probably one of my favourite psalms. It's not Psalm 23, which is lovely and beautiful, or Psalm 139, also beautiful. It's Psalm 77, which maybe the numbers might not ring a bell so much, but it's a song. In the title of the song, it says, of Asaph. There was a group of temple musicians appointed by David to sing before the Lord, musicians and singers, and Asaph was one, and there was a whole, and they played music and they sang, and it looks like they were prophetic. And so there's lots of psalms of David in the psalms, and the psalms of Asaph, there's about 10, 12. But they're all amazing worship songs on the one hand, but also amazingly honest on the other hand. And often in the middle of these psalms is like a break, and the Lord kind of speaks, often. So Psalm 73 to Psalm 83, roughly, the songs of Asaph. And they're a great song. Psalm 73, remember that one? I was like a brute beast before you. Ever felt like a brute beast before the Lord? And yet until I entered the sanctuary, until I got another perspective, another word from God, that's Psalm 73, also incredibly beautiful. This here, Psalm 77, it's another one of those kind of psalms, led by a worship leader, written in this school of musicians, but really honest. So can we have it on the screen, please, Esther? And it says this, verse 6 verses, I cried out to God for help. That's a start, isn't it? Start right there. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. This guy was desperate. I was in distress, and I sought the Lord. At night I stretched out untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. This is like a long period of grief and distress. Those are the first couple of verses. I remembered you, O God, and was I helped? I groaned. Even as his thoughts now come to God in his distress, I groaned. I mused. My spirit grew faint. Selah, a pause. Another 3 verses. Now you kept my eye, and it's now kind of turning from his distress to complaint to God. It was you. You kept my eyes from closing, and I was too troubled to speak. Ever blame God for anything? I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart mused, and my spirit inquired. It's remembering in the sense of, it was a lot better before. Somehow things were better before. And now he's seriously struggling. And in this version, we've got, I remembered, I cried out. And some of the scholars believe it can be translated, I cry out, I remember. Present tense, it's a present tense also moment before the Lord. This psalmist is pouring out his heart. So those are the first 6 verses. And then 7 to 9, it's like another verse, stanza, and it gets even serious, right? He was struggling, now he turns to the Lord, and he's sort of faintly accusatory, you kept me awake, and now he's getting serious. Now it's serious complaint. Will the Lord reject me forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? Pause. Selah. Right, now that's more serious, isn't it? That's accusing God of his character, isn't it? These are some of the basic things. This is no longer in a cathedral with nice choir boys, with nice fluffy collars, singing some beautiful song, even though that's wonderful in itself, that raises praise. This is raw, this is This is rugged. This is wounds open. This is honesty, isn't it? This is complete and utter honesty. And I just love that about God. He doesn't want this pious religion. You know, there's moments to worship him, we get caught up, wonderful. But what he loves is that kind of sheer honesty with him. It's a down-to-earth, nitty-gritty relationship. That's what he wants. And this psalm's in the Bible, you know, because this psalmist went through this and was honest and had the courage to be honest with God. And he got, I believe, some answers, at least some comfort, because he was honest with God. And I find that, for me, that's freeing. That is so freeing. There was a time in my life when I was a Christian, but I was just going through the kind of the steps and losing my, well, probably faith slowly, but several years ago, realizing it was a moment out in some fields, being honest with God. I could be honest with God, really pour out my heart to him, and he answers when we're honest. You know, we come to the cross, don't we? We're honest. We have sin before you. We're honest. And it's that moment that grace comes. That's the moment when grace comes. And so what's in verse 7 to 9, what's the psalmist accusing God? He's accusing him of the basic fundamentals of Old Testament faith. Will you never show your favor, his favor? You know, the people of Israel were shown favor. Now he's accusing there's no favor. Has his unfailing love vanished? Unfailing love, that's that kind of chesed, that's the love that will not let me go. Basic thing of God, God's character. And he's accusing, has this failed? His promise. Isn't that the kind of fundamental things that we believe about God? He's made promises and he will keep them. Yeah, we base our lives on those, don't we? You know, if we believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, we will not perish but have eternal life. What a wonderful promise. Bible full of promises. But he's got to that point. Does God keep his promises? Another kind of pillar in our faith. Has God forgotten to be merciful? Mercy. Isn't that a fundamental characteristic of God that has been revealed to us? And has he in anger withheld his compassion? So favor, mercy, love, promises, compassion. You know, that deep love of God that comes to us with an aching heart. All those things thrown up in the air. Does God have these things? And what's he accusing him? You know, you've rejected me. You'll never show it again. Have you vanished? You don't keep your promises. You've forgotten to be merciful. And you're angry instead of compassionate. What a litany of accusations. You ever got that honest with God? I struggle, but as I say, the Lord invites us to be honest. But that's where he is. That's what he brings. And the Lord hears him, doesn't blow him away, doesn't say, get away from me, you can't say this. He does, he did. And the Lord met him in his love, actually, in his favor, in his compassion, in his unfailing love. And so what's the turning point? Verse 10, then I thought, to this I will appeal, the years of the right hand of the Most High. That's actually like the pivot in the psalm if you look at it. He's going to change from pouring out his soul to, on one level, remembering, not in the sense of nostalgia, but something serious about God and what God has done for him. But, so can I be a bit geeky for a minute? Verse 10 is translated in some other translations slightly differently because instead of appeal, Hebrew, I'm not a great Hebrew scholar, but it's made up of consonants and they don't put the vowels in like Arabic today. So if you've got three letters that are consonants, it can mean different things. Depends what the sense is, what the context is. And they don't put the vowels in like we do in English. If we said FCS, we wrote that down, FCS, and left to the imagination or the context the vowels and then the word, You'd say, oh, it could be focus. Put in O and U, focus. If you put in A and E, you get faces. Yeah, see what I mean? So that's what's here. You've got you've got consonants, which could be translated appeal and could be translated grief. And the other thing is years could be translated change, because it's the same three consonants. So the RSV translates it like this: it's my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. That's an interesting. And the Jerusalem Bible: this is what distresses me, that the power of the Most High is not what it was. I do like that translation. He's distressed. Have you changed, God? Are things different? So whether anyway, so that's what he's crying out to God for in verse 10. And that's the change, though. There's a pause. And in verse 11, something changes. Have you changed? Can I remember really what you have done? And in fact, the answer is yes. In verse 11, I will remember. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. I will remember your miracles of long ago. When we're going through crisis and we're even questioning the character of God, it's good to remember his faithfulness, what he has done to bring us safe thus far. And not only to remember, in verse 12, I will meditate on your works. It won't be a superficial, oh yeah, that's true. I will meditate, I will ruminate. It's like, that word is like a cow that takes the cud, the grass, and chews it. And it goes down into the stomach. And then it comes up again, and he chews it again. And apparently that happens several times as cows chew and ruminate. That's meditate. Yeah, I'm really going to, you were faithful. Are the promises you have made to me? Yeah, I'm going to think on those, not my distress. I'm going to meditate on those, he says, and consider all your mighty deeds. And something is changing, something's shifting here. Your ways, O God, wow, are holy. That's quite a change. And now we're in verse, 13. That's quite a journey, isn't it? From I cried out, and you don't love me anymore, and you have forgotten to, wow, you are holy. What God is great as you? Is there any other God really like you? When I meditate and think about your works and deeds, you are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. You've done miraculous things in my life, in history, in our faith, salvation history, in our own personal lives. You display your power among the peoples. You've seen that, haven't you, each one of you, in different ways, in your lives, circumstances, in others. And in verse 15, that with your mighty arm you redeemed your people. His heart is really opening as he meditates and reflects and remembers the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. It's interesting how he brings those characters up. Jacob, who was sort of self-centered, and God changed him. I will not let you go till you bless me. And he was changed. In fact, in the verses, verse 1 to verse 6, remember, I cried out to you on my bed, I groaned, I counted I and me 18 times, right? So that's I. That was Jacob, really. And God met him in that kind of self-centered moment. And then he mentions Joseph. Well, Joseph, he was the victim of injustice, things that it wasn't right. There were horrible things done to him. And whether it's kind of a self-centeredness or things done to us that cause the distress of this psalmist, he knows that, he realizes and remembers that God is so faithful. And he pauses. And this is in the middle of a verse. That's like a four-line verse. This is verse 3 when he mentions Jacob and Joseph. And before he gets to the end, it's like another wave crashes in. Not just as he was kind of getting there with God. Verse 6 is like in the midst of that reflection and reorientation. Verse 16, the waters saw you, O God, the waters saw you and writhed, the very depths were convulsed. It's like another wave crashes in of his distress. Sometimes we struggle, don't we? We kind of get there and then the Lord, and things happen again, and he remembers what he was going through. But it seems like the Lord even speaks out of those chaotic waters, out of that darkness, because even as the waters crashed in, verse 17, the clouds poured down water, the skies resounded with thunder, but it's now seeing God in it. Your arrows flashed back and forth, your thunder was heard in the whirlwind, your lightning lit up the world, the earth trembled and quaked. It's like the God coming in, even through that distress of this psalmist. And he gets to this amazing point, verse 19, your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. That's such a beautiful verse, isn't it? Your path led through the sea, or your path leads through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints are not seen. Even in this storm, you will lead me as you did the people of Israel in the Red Sea as the waters heaped up on either side. And even though I can't see your footprints, I know that you are there. What a transformation. What comfort this man found. And then it's the last, that was kind of the waters crashing in was like a stanza all of its own, crashing in, and he finishes what he had started in verse 15. But you led your people like a flock, or you lead your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. You lead me. You promised to lead me, even though it's difficult and the storms are crashing in. And so he could know that, not in verse 7, the Lord's rejecting him, the Lord's receiving him. He is showing his favor. He is revealing his unfailing love. His promises do stand. He is merciful. He does have compassion because he leads us. He leads us even through the storm. And even if his footprints at times are not seen. And you will remember, obviously, that very famous picture of footprints in the sand with the poem. I'm sure you all remember it very well. It's so powerful. Can I read it to you? You've heard it, I'm sure, many times. Some of you might even have this on your wall. Can we have it up, please, Esther? But this is so powerful. It kind of comes from this psalm, footprints. One night I dreamt a dream as I was walking along the beach with my Lord and across the dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene I noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me, one to the Lord. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand, and I noticed that at many times along the path of my life, especially at the very lowest and saddest times, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked the Lord about it. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why. When I needed you the most, you would leave me. And he whispered, my precious child, I love you and will never leave you. Never, ever during your trials and testings, when you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. So would you let the Lord minister to you afresh his unfailing love, his compassion, his mercy, And maybe these are stormy times, like in the life of this psalmist, but he has promised to lead. He leads the flock, he leads you. He leads you gently. His footprints are there. Sometimes we don't see them. And even in the crashing storm that might seem and is man-made, the Lord comes. So can we take a moment to let the Lord minister to you as we contemplate this image of the Lord carrying us.